In 2013, a strange hole was discovered within the state of Nevada. It was found by a young adolescent who recorded his findings on his phone with the intent of posting them on the video sharing platform Vine. After recording everything, they called the local authorities, but when they arrived at the child's location, they were nowhere to be seen. All that was left was their phone lying by the edge of the hole. Ever since then, scientists like myself have been studying the hole with the intent of trying to find its origins. Its shape, being a perfect circle, is far too precise to be considered natural, but its depth goes beyond what humans are capable of, even with the right tools. However, only its shape and size have ever been studied due to the difficulties the hole presented. The farthest humans have drilled into the Earth is around 12.3 kilometers, or the Kola Super Deep Borehole SG-3 located in Russia, which is deeper than even the Mariana Trench, but still seemingly nowhere as deep as the one we're studying. Sending humans to research the hole would be impossible, as not only would we have to worry about the change in temperature, pressure, and the amount of time it would take just to reach the same point as the super deep borehole, but we do not know how deep this hole truly is. Until now. In 2018, a new type of drone was developed, one that could survive the changes that humans wouldn't. It has an experimental nuclear battery attached to it that will ensure that it will last however long it takes to reach the bottom, and a high-quality camera to record everything it finds. Our only concern is keeping a solid connection with the drone and the footage it sends us, but I suppose we'll have to figure that out as we go. The goal is to see where the hole leads, and why one of this nature would even exist. The drone was sent, slowly descending down the hole as the pilots were careful not to hit the edge so it wouldn't get damaged. It took hours just to arrive at the borehole point. It took days and several shifts just to make any sort of progress. It just kept going, and going, and going, and going. That is when one scientist notices something. Comparing the footage of entry up to this point, he had discovered that the walls had slowly started to smooth out and lose their color, becoming a dark gray. By the time we made this discovery, another was right around the corner. The drone started to act strange. We realized that we didn't need to be as careful about ensuring that the drone doesn't go into a free fall. Up until this point, we've had to slow down and even halt our progress to make sure that we weren't going as fast as not to destroy the drone, but we haven't needed to in hours. The gravity is somehow weaker within this area. We were unsure what to think of these discoveries until we saw him. The boy. The same one within the unposted videos. His body was nearly completely decomposed. Most of his skeleton was exposed, and little to no flesh remained. Though it wasn't completely intact, either parts were separated from the fall or time itself. But despite being vulnerable to the elements, no creature had touched his body. It was simply left to rot all alone. We theorized that he might have fell down the hole, but this isn't the bottom. His body just floats there. Some parts are even bumped into the drone. As gruesome as the sight was for most, it was a point of discovery. That there was an end to this journey, but not in the way that we were thinking. The boy's body was a sign that we were halfway to the end. How can we tell this? Because this is the center point of gravity. As when we continued our descent, the drone slowly rotated and the same force was needed to make it fly upwards. This is strange, because we're nowhere near the Earth's core. We were only 300 kilometers down. To reach the Earth's core would take almost 3,000 kilometers. As we continued our journey, the world lost more color, and the walls became more refined. This is the moment we were waiting for. After almost a month, we finally saw the other side. And what was waiting for us, we still don't understand. The world was completely gray, including the sky, which was completely empty. No clouds, stars, nor the sun or the moon could be seen. It looked like a barren wasteland of perfectly flat ground. Excited, we piloted the drone around the area. The nature of this place intrigued us. We couldn't help but to see what it had in store for us. We reached what looked like a small town, so we got closer. We were uncertain about the nature of the small town, as it's very similar to the hole we discovered 5 years prior. The buildings were the same color as the ground. In fact, it appeared as though they were growing from the ground. Like a plant or a small mountain almost. Despite their shape, these structures seemed to be completely natural. In fact, everything was like this. The structures that resembled sidewalks, roads, signs, and a tall humanoid statue seemingly guarding a round building. It's that moment one of the researchers jokingly remarked about how it looked similar to the Alien Research Center gift shop in Rachel, Nevada, which isn't too far from our current location. But that's when we began to notice something. Just like that, one of the other researchers requested to bring the drone up and point the camera down at this fake town. And that's when we made our greatest discovery. The geography of this small town is identical to that of Rachel, Nevada. And not just vaguely, it's like looking at a grayscaled photo of the town. This world reflects ours. Its shape is a near exact copy of us. But instead of its structures being built, they seemingly grew out of the ground naturally. The only difference is that everything seems to be flipped horizontally, as the direction we took to get to this duplicate town would have taken us further away from it, not to it. It's almost like looking in a mirror. When you look in a mirror, let's say to brush your teeth, your mirror itself would look like they're brushing the left side of their mouth when you're brushing your right. The only other difference is that the things that have not been replicated are most organic life. No humans, no animals, no insects. Unless it's rooted to the ground in some way, whether that be natural or artificially, it doesn't get replicated. The only living things that seem to get replicated are plant life or fungi. But there is life in this world, and the first we discovered we call the Less Rest. It appears to look like a curved six-legged bench complete with armrests. We almost completely missed it until the pilot wanted to admire its appearance. It's true. Unlike the flat, colorless buildings, this thing actually looked detailed. But that was almost our biggest mistake, as out of nowhere the seat split open, revealing a massive maw filled with broken teeth and gums too close to its lips. Its throat widened as we can almost see its stomach acid from outside of its body. That's how close its stomach was to its mouth. If that was a stomach. It's hard to see what's really inside. While open, the top of its mouth almost appeared like a backrest for the bench. Quickly, some scientists pulled the drone back, but the thing began to leap at us like an angry toad. We almost got knocked out of the air, but thankfully, we were able to ascend to a point where the creature could not reach us. We were unsure if there was any significant damage done to the drone, so we let it float in the air as we collected ourselves and discussed our findings. Life does exist in this world, and even if it seems to reflect the structures in our world, much like the ground-risen buildings, seeing a town we were all too familiar with completely flipped on its head with that thing living inside it, and possibly more. It was like looking into a twisted mirror. Twisted mirror. Twister. But this was an opportunity we couldn't pass up. We gathered our findings and sent them to our higher-ups, hoping to get more funding for the project to research this world we named Twister. They agreed, hoping to find new resources to use. We made more drones, expanded our workforce, and gave ourselves a new name, the TRA, short for the Twister Research Association. And these next few years I hope will be filled with discovery. From our research, we can conclude that Twister has no source of light, either natural or artificial. And yet, we can see everything with no problem. We never needed to turn on the drone's flashlights or activate night vision mode. We can see everything clear as day. But as there is no source of light, that also means there are no shadows either. No structure, creature, or even the drones make any sort of shade. And no matter the time of the day, nothing changes. None of us have yet to understand it, which made us even more curious as to why a creature would appear as a street light. We call it the shot light. It is a tall creature that appears like a severed arm. What makes it stand is a tumor-like mass that seems to help keep it in balance. At the bottom are tiny little nubs that almost appear like thumbs. We assume that if this creature can move, it would do so with these tiny little nubs, much like a starfish. But once again, that is if this creature can move, as none of us have recorded it doing so. At the end is a hand with a few fingers, and at the tips of the fingers are what appears to be human eyes being hung by long hairs. No recorded creature in Twister has had eyes so far, let alone ones that resemble a human's. But these eyes are not to see, they are to hunt. They use these eyes as bait as other creatures, such as the Less Rest, approach the eyes wanting a taste. Once one has bitten an eye, they find themselves in quite a predicament, as they are unable to open their mouths and escape. As they struggle, their bodies begin to shrink in mass, crunching in on themselves until the squirming finally ends. And soon, all that remains is loose skin, teeth, and nails of what was before. It almost works like a reverse Venus flytrap. Its nubs then extend outward and pull the remains under its mass. It's hiding the evidence, most likely to ensure its next prey will come willingly. We are not sure of the extent of these creatures' intelligence. They could be like common animals or far smarter than humans. We'd have to put them through tests to truly understand how smart they really are, but that would involve bringing a creature through the hole, and I doubt there are any that could survive the trip. Depending on their intelligence or how their minds work, they'd create a system similar to our world, rules or laws to follow. But they haven't. Are they just like animals that only go by the unspoken rules of their instinct? Or are they so intelligent that they've evolved beyond the need of simple law and order? We can't say for sure, but the Sinregards do. Simple, one-legged creatures to have an inflatable bubble of flesh on the top. They deflate their head, merge the flesh, and inflate it again to make it into a different shape. They almost appear as hopping signs. They're the only species that we've seen so far that moves in a pack. A group of 5, maybe even 20 can be seen bouncing around, changing the shape of their head and waving them about. For what purpose? I would assume to be a warning of caution, similar to the traffic signs of our world. Different shapes have different meanings. We don't know what every form means yet, but we do have an idea about a few of them. One appears like an arrow aiming upwards. It will bend its single leg to point said arrow in one direction. Some use this as a way to guide the pack or to bring attention to something near them. One appears like a screaming face, its mouth a dark black pattern taking up most of its head. This seems to be a sign of danger, a warning to steer clear. If it's a cube, they will find shelter. But just like our signs, many tend to disregard them, hence why we gave them the name. Disinregards. They disregard signs. Dis-sign regard. I'm rather proud of that one, actually. Anyway, the Disinregards attempt to get the attention of other species, but most tend to ignore them or treat them as their next meal. Some seem to attack either as a form of self-defense or from pure annoyance. They've even tried to use the arrow form to bring attention to the drones, but with no avail. They don't seem to have any prey to hunt, but they do have many predators. They, I assume, are the prey animals of this world. When being hunted, they can inflate their head until it explodes to let out a deafening pop to scare off any hunters. Maybe order doesn't belong in this world, but they aren't the only ones to try anyway. There is another creature that attempted to bring some order into Twisterra. The more capitalistic type of order, but order nonetheless. The first creature that we discovered to live almost exclusively in these ground-risen buildings is the Lodestock. It appears as a set of shelves similar to that of an aisle in a store. They are always seen in a pack, but the size of the pack is dependent on the population of the area and the size of the building. Sometimes there are only about 10, or maybe even hundreds of them, but they are never alone. They remain completely stationary. While we can't discount the possibility that they can move, we have yet to record such an event. Despite this, the shelves are always full. Rocks, meat, jars of what appears to be lightning bugs, I'm assuming, and much more. Some of the items seem to be similar to the other creatures of Twisterra. I believe I saw the backrest of a Lesrest, and the deflated head of a Disinregard on them. Also a large hand with 7 fingers? How could they get these things? Easy. They deal with thieves very efficiently. They stand perfectly still, and if a creature stalks into a building, they become tempted by the items the Lodestock presents. If they take one and attempt to flee, the Lodestock will collapse on them, its weight crushing their bodies as its shelves chop them up. As they stand back up, the shelves are fuller than ever. The creatures of Twisterra are much more tempted by the Lodestocks with more items. Some have managed to escape with their desired item, but it seems that the Lodestock have an impeccable memory, as they aren't as patient if the thief returns to the scene of the crime, sometimes crushing them before they can even grab an item. There is one way to take what's on the shelf and survive. This is where the rocks come in. A Disinregard came into the store. It appeared to be kicking a rock in front of it. It slowly crept in, walking through the aisles, even looking around as if it was browsing. It stops and notices a jar of those strange fireflies that never go out. It took a few tries, but it managed to kick the rock onto the shelf as it inflated its head into a balloon and wrapped it around the jar. It cautiously bounced away, and yet, the loadstock did nothing. It took the exchange. But what if the disintegrar tried to take something else without offering more? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I would assume that it wouldn't be too happy. I suppose the loadstock succeeded where the disintegrar failed. It's bringing order to Twistera, but how long can this order last? Most of the creatures we've seen of Twistera are much like the animals of our world. Unless they need to feed, they will typically avoid contact with other creatures or stick with a pack. None seem to be really hostile. That is until we saw the Nevis. One of the researchers was venturing through a forest. He had noticed that one major difference between the trees of our world and the trees of Twistera is that their trees appear as massive poles coming out of the ground, with only a few smaller poles protruding outward. Even if the tree it is attempting to replicate is full of branches and leaves, the Twistera version only will have a fraction of that amount, if any. Leaves are not replicated, most likely because they are not a constant, and that's another thing we've noticed. Even if they're artificial or natural, something like leaves are not replicated in Twistera because they don't remain in the same position for an extended period of time. They sprout during the spring, and during the autumn season, they lose their color and fall to the ground. It would seem that something has to be rooted to the earth for at least a year for it to be replicated in the world of Twistera. Maybe longer. We're still not entirely sure. But while flying through the almost industrial-appearing forest, fog began to roll in. But the drone still caught something unique. The silhouette of what looks like a tree from our world. It's not completely straight in shape, and appears to have a natural amount of branches. It sticks out with all of its detail. But we've learned what detail means in this world. Minimalism equals lifeless structures, as detail represents life. That thing is not a tree. It's imitating one. We tried to study it, but the fog was dense. It made things hard to see. So, we took a risk and got a bit closer. Its full form was still in frame when we heard the most hellish noise this world ever produced. It was like a chorus of distant guttural screams, a mix between a human in pain and an animal's growl. The branches began to move, almost like they're swinging in the wind. Some clutched to the ground beneath it as others reached to the sky. We began to move back, but before we could even touch the controls, that thing ran at us at incredible speeds. Far faster than its size would make you think it would. It slammed the drone on the ground and tore it apart in seconds. And just like that, we lost signal. Another drone managed to capture the explosion of the nuclear battery from the distance. Thankfully, it's nowhere near as powerful as a nuclear weapon, but the explosion was still massive. There was no way that thing survived. And yet, running out of the fiery cloud was a massive tree-like structure. It was covered in flames, yet still it appeared to only be slightly burned. No real damage was done to it. While these things can hurt, and thus die, they're far more resistant than anything on Earth. Perhaps there's a reason for the separation between realms. Looking at the footage of the Nevis in slow motion, which one of the scientists called, due to the number of limbs, 7. In reverse, that's Nevis. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It wasn't clawing at the drone. It was taking bites. At the end of each finger was something that resembled a human fingernail, but with each supposed scratch, the nail would lift up, revealing a tiny set of razor-sharp thin teeth. Those weren't fingers. They were mouths. Which means those aren't arms or legs. They're its necks or throats. With its torso being one big stomach. At least it's what it seems like. We can only make a guess from the footage. As there is no moon or sun in Twistera, that means there is no night or day. Of course, the passage of time still exists, but we're still uncertain on how time can be measured here. For now, we're going off of how time works in our world, until we have a complete understanding of it. But while there is no moon or stars above when they fill the sky in our world, there do seem to be creatures that mimic them. A scientist once saw what seemed to look like a shooting star. Another thought it was a fast-moving firefly. Well, it seems like it might be a bit of both. We call them starmites. They are small beings that seem to be made out of nothing but light. At least that's what we figure from what we can see, as they're so bright that no matter how much we alter the footage, we cannot see a body or any form of mass inside them. They really do seem to be sentient sparkles floating around. They don't seem to be bothered by the drones. Either they lack natural predators, or they don't see normally. Maybe they're like jellyfish, alive but lacking consciousness. They simply are. Whatever the case may be, we did find something interesting about them. Perhaps they are our method to measuring time in this world. As after days of studying them, we noticed that the number of active star mites changes at certain points. For 119 hours, there are barely any in the sky, as many as you can easily count with your fingers. But as those 119 hours progress, more and more star mites appear. And when we enter the 120th hour, the sky is filled with them. It's like seeing a grass field in the summer night and watching dozens of fireflies dance. But this time, it's hundreds, if not thousands of them. It's the most beautiful sight that Twistera has ever produced. Many were beginning to believe that this world was filled with nothing but horrors, but the horrors haven't started yet. Despite what we said earlier, it seems that the star mites do in fact have one natural predator: the moon men. I call them that as the top of them looks similar to that of a human being, but from the waist down they form a crescent tail that curves forward. So they're literally moon men. Sure, it's not the most creative name. We're scientists, not fiction writers. Would you rather me call them something like lunar flying sapien? Look, we know none of you refer to animals by their scientific name for a reason, and I don't even understand why we do that. But regardless, we decided that the 120-hour cycle that star mites go by is a full Twistera day. During the last hour of a Twistera day, the star mites are fully active, but why did they deplete so quickly? Easy. The moon men. The moon men have the unique ability of teleportation. They use it to quickly spawn into a cloud of star mites and consume them by the handful. The star mites only flee if the moon man's body comes into contact with them, so they most likely are blind. As for whether or not they're completely conscious is beyond us. Besides that, the other species of Twistera seem to have a form of respect for the moon men. Most creatures do not attack them. Some don't even growl or show signs of aggression. They can sit on a lesres, hide under the shadow of a shot light, or even get close to a nevis without anchoring it. Perhaps they don't see them as a threat. Or maybe they realize that catching them would be impossible due to their teleportation skills. Or it could be that they see them as protectors. The moon men are not just curious, they're kind. They help other species escape dangerous situations by warping them to safety, and if a predator stands before them, then they will cease their hunt and move on to something else. They are the guardians of this world. If we could make contact with any species in Twistera, it would probably be them. But the pressure changes in the hole would probably kill them. That is until one scientist had an idea. We had a meeting not too long ago. Our higher-ups, while impressed with our findings, are getting noticeably frustrated with the results. They seem to be more interested in finding things that could help us. They don't really seem to care about the creatures, though I have heard that they thought the Nevis could have some military purposes, but that's assuming they could control it. The organization cannot go on forever, so we have to make some sort of breakthrough, and fast. One scientist suggested the idea of bringing a moon man here to Earth. They're the most peaceful creatures, so we wouldn't have to worry about them attacking us. Their curious nature would probably allow us to study them. And it's possible that their teleportation abilities could allow them to survive the journey. But there's just one problem. How do we do it? Another scientist suggested the idea of turning on the lights of one of the drones and lure them down the hole as they think that the drone is a pack of star mites. Well, it was worth a shot. So that's what we did. We waited until the last hour of a Twistera day and brought the drone into the cloud of star mites, but not too far in. It only took a few tries, but eventually one of the moon men got curious enough to follow us. It didn't try to grab us, so it's clear that it was aware that we were not its food. It gave us a chance, and we were going to use it. We led it to the hole and drove the device in. It seemed hesitant at first, and possible that the beings of Twistera always knew about the hole but never dared to enter it. Until now. The moon man, seeing that the drone was fine, decided to follow. We kept moving, and the whole time, the Moon Man floated behind us. It was almost a haunting sight. It was like the Grim Reaper himself was navigating the path to the afterlife. We made it to the halfway point, and it stopped at the boy's body. We almost forgot it was still there. I feel almost guilty that I didn't suggest that we removed it first, but science matters far more than one stupid kid's mistake. We learn from mistakes, not just from our own, but others as well. The Moon Man stared at the boy's body. It was almost as if it was mourning the loss of the boy's life. It grabbed the remains and gently carried them as it continued to follow us. It made it to the top. We made sure to do this mission at night in case the sun's natural light was too much for it. We all stood around the hole, amazed by the haunting creature. Its complete white mass towered over us. I looked around as it gently put the boy's body on the ground, and for the first time, a creature of Twisterror was studying us. It approached me as I was in the center of its path. It stared me down, so I reached out a hand as it began to reach for mine. Before I can make any sort of contact, however, it began to screech. A loud, blood-curdling scream made all of us cover our ears in pain. It tried to reach us back, and when it turned around, I could see why. One of the other scientists tried to sedate it. He doesn't realize what he had just done. And neither did we. It teleported away, most likely back home for safety. We chewed out that scientist and forced him to leave. We immediately went back to the surveillance room where there was a panic. Some of the screens were covered in static. And then we saw it. The Moon Man returned to its natural habitat, lying on the ground from the effects of the sedative, as other Moon Men and creatures of Twisterror surrounded it. And just then, one of the Moon Men quickly turned its head at the drone watching them. It warped towards it, as the footage went to static. It wasn't just the Moon Men either. Every creature we saw, and even others we didn't get to study, were hunting down the drones. When the final screen went to static, we all went silent. It would seem that this project was a complete failure. But it wasn't over yet. As one man asked where his colleague went, we looked around and noticed that a few of us were missing. Most of the men who were at the hole were gone, plus a few others. Another pointed behind me, but as I turned around there was nothing. But when I looked back at the pointer, he was gone too. I knew what was happening. We made the creatures of Twisterror aware of us, and from one simple action, we made them see us as the monsters. Just then, the feed of one of the drones turned back on for just a moment. My God. My friends. They were there in their world. Moon Men were abducting us. As I stared into the screen, the man squinted in pain, but no creature was touching him just yet. Every hole on his body began to bleed as he writhed in pain. His eyes bulged out of his head as his torso began to collapse in on itself. They can survive being in our world, but we can't survive being in theirs. But that didn't stop them. Before the feed ended, I saw the creatures begin to close in on the poor man. Everyone began to flee, but I stayed behind to make one last message to not just our higher-ups, but to as many people as possible. Because who's to say that they're going to stop at just a TRA? This could become a widespread invasion. And even if it doesn't, I still need to put out a warning to make sure that no one else makes the same mistake I did. I reached over the closest computer and started to type as fast as I could. Close the hole. Never go down there again. But before I could press send, in just a blink of an eye, I saw what the inside of a less rest stomach looks like. We studied monsters without realizing why they hide under our beds.
Good evening. You just reached 96.9 The Fume. I'm Tony Rule, and I'm Track the Phone. And this rule has some new hits from bands like Back Alley Boys and Wink 103 for you to rock out to. But first, it's time to take some calls from our listeners. Here's one now. Good evening. You just reached 96.9 The Fume. You're currently speaking to Tony Rule. How can I help you this mad day?
You have to listen to me. We don't have much time.
You're right. We've got to get back to our sweet jam soon.
No, listen to me. We've made a terrible mistake, and now we're paying for it. I work for an organization called
You okay, man? You seem to be breaking up a bit.
They're trying to censor me. Listen, don't go outside. They know we were watching them in their territory, and now they're coming to ours.
Hey, listen, that's great, man, but we've got to get back to our sweet new jams. Hey, tell you what, call those people on 98.5 The Freak. They'll surely help you out.
No, stop!
Are you sure that was such a good idea? Oh, listen, Track. We get loons all the time here. It's nothing to worry about. How about instead of worrying, we... Ah, great, another piece of equipment broke. I swear this place is falling apart. Be right back. Wait, you forgot to turn on the jams, you melonhead! Don't call me a melonhead, you can't... Ah!